There's definitely this like treating addiction like it was a thing outside of them that was inside of them, but it wasn't them. Does that make sense? It wasn't it's not their
Mhm.
core. So they would
Mhm.
talk about it with this distance sometime of like the things that they did or that their body did in control of it by being controlled by it in a past life or even yesterday wasn't them, wasn't their core.
Don't Hide the Scars, a weekly podcast focused on addiction and recovery. Created by the nonprofit Pain, Parents and Addicts in Need, and founded by Flindt Andersen.
Welcoming to Don't Hide the Scars, Jared Callahan, one of the producers of Clean Slate. It's just a phenomenal documentary that caught your attention and mine, Flindt, about two friends in this other drug recovery program who struggle to come to terms with their addiction and mental illness. And it's beautifully shot. I mean, the access that you got was phenomenal because of what it illustrated. And just really, I want to know first, why this documentary for you?
Oh, it's a long story that once people are in your life, well, hello, hi, both of you. Thanks for having me. Once people whom you love open up about their addiction and are honest and really vulnerable with you, as I've learned as being enveloped into the recovery family for the last 5 years making this film, vulnerability and honesty are tied to survival. I mean, if you aren't willing to do that, then you're still on a downward spiral. And as these two guys who became the main subjects of the film Clean Slate, Josh and Cassidy, had well practiced being open and honest. And as soon as they figured out that we were trustworthy people, I joined the recovery facility by invitation and surprised myself at their willingness to put their whole selves into a situation. And they want to make movies. So I had mentored them for about a year in making movies themselves before I got the idea that we could make this into a documentary. So I was already working with them on script writing and ideating and brainstorming, which is my favorite thing. And when they couldn't get financing to make a feature film version of the story they wanted to tell, and they realized they could make a short film, that's when the documentarian side of my brain clicked and went, oh, the story isn't how good or not good the short film is that they're going to make. The story is the story behind the story. So Clean Slate, the film that you would watch or have watched, is these two guys in this community trying to make a short film version with actors portraying their story and their trauma. And me and my friends, I directed this film Clean Slate that you can now watch, which is watching them try and make a short film. So Josh, one of the characters says, and I think we put it in the trailer, he says, there's a reason people don't make movies in recovery because it's impossible. Filmmaking and telling art, making movies is impossible enough, and doing it within the world of recovery and the ups and downs of being on the road to sobriety, it was a cluster. It was crazy and wild and made for a really good honest film. So that's how I got roped in through relationship, basically.
No, and I think you hit some really great points there, and that process of recovery is it's a challenging journey. I mean, Flindt,
to say the least.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean it's as challenging as it gets. I mean, I posted something the other day and I can't remember exactly what it said, but basically, we don't have to be embarrassed around anybody about our addiction. We're simply badasses for what we've done and what we've accomplished. Because it takes a big set of balls. It does. It's huge. People don't understand that first, depending on your length of use and all your past circumstances, it could be 1 year, 2 years, 4 years, 5 years, before you even start to even feel better. Right. And right. And you're getting, not to make excuses, because that's not what it's about, but we are so used to not living in the real world. We are so used to not taking care of ourselves, our families, our financial responsibilities, our personal health, that it takes a lot of time for that stuff to come back. And it's not easy.
You're so right. I feel like ego has swirled in with chemical dependence and addiction in the insanely complex thing that it can be. So simple and so complex. What I saw is that if they were trying to be prideful or keep you at an arm's length, they were still failing. And this group of people, it was all men's recovery facility. The men there, they would be so honest and laugh so hard and say things that were just so what just came out of your mouth? Like, there's a joke of like, wow, I was dead for 8 minutes. And the retort was, well, I was shot and I was dead for 10. And they all
Right.
laughed. And I was
Right.
looking around like, can you hear yourselves? Like, you know,
Yeah.
but they do know. So I asked Josh about it later, one of the main characters, and he said, it's two sides of the same coin. We laugh very, very hard because if we didn't laugh every day, we'd cry every day. And at the same time, they weren't putting it off. They'd also be vulnerable and honest and emotional together. And that was absolutely, it's all you could ever hope for when you're making a documentary, when you find a subject collaborator, someone that you're going to film, is when someone is putting on what they think you want to hear and they're shining you on, you can feel it. It feels fake. It's like a veneer. But as soon as they would let us down into moments of relapse or tough stuff or relationships that are maybe permanently broken in their lives, and they would share those things, it's incredibly relatable. And for people on the road of recovery already, or as they've said, everybody knows someone who's in recovery or should be, there's a lot of ways that this film has then related with friends, family members, people who are trying to see themselves honestly in a mirror for the first time. And the aspects of these two guys, Josh and Cassidy, can relate with anybody. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah, it is. And that's the reality of addiction, that, it's comedy and tragedy. Flindt and I,
Right.
we've got some morbid things, or at least morbid to other people, that we laugh about.
You have to.
But we have many tales of tragedy for the people that we've lost, the numerous people that we've lost,
Sure.
Hundreds, thousands, and continue to.
Sure. I mean, and even while you're in recovery, I mean, I remember in 2007, my family had lived in this one house for 25 years, and I couldn't play catch up anymore. And so in 2004, I had to move my family out, and we leased another place. And we lost it to a house fire, and we lost everything, and it was arson. It was proven to be arson. And I mean, it's not funny at all, but I will make the joke. I'll say, because I look at my garage now, I have more shit than I've ever had before. And it's like, I think everybody ought to have a house fire at least once in their life, right? I mean, just to get rid of all the bad shit, I mean, you have to make light of some of this stuff. Because if not, really, we will go nuts, trying to figure it out. A lot of it I don't want to figure out.
Right.
A lot of it I did come to terms with, but again, there's some of that stuff that I just say, you know what? Thank God I got out of that mess. I really don't need to know any more details about it, and just move on.
That's really interesting that there really is this like needed death and resurrection to your old self, and who are you going to be, or who's the you before addiction, and kind of they would talk about like fostering safety for this person that existed before and still is in you, but has had so much battle in their life. But then there's also this notion of hope that, as they shared, the part of the reason all of them, but Josh and Cassidy, were so willing to let us film them at really rough moments in their lives, was a hope that their tomorrow would be better, that today has hope because they can get out of bed and do today differently than yesterday. And that also, no matter what a relapse or a season might be rough, that hope keeps them getting out of bed and keeps striving towards mental health and sobriety. And that blend of humor, hope, and also reverence towards what their voice, if allowed to go unbridled, of what addiction could do. And I've seen it. I've been in relationship with both of them long enough to see seasons of health and unhealth. And I also then have fallen into enabler and trying my best, and I'm trying to be everything, and I'm not a social worker. And then there were times and seasons where Cassidy, one of the guys, ended up living at our facility farm that we were running. He lived with us for a year, and he stole all my camera equipment and pawned it for drug money. So I've been the person trying to get you a job, get you a house, get you a car, while at the other side of your mouth you are stealing from me and my family. And it's really rough. Like, it's rough. And I see them as they open themselves up, how, as a friend, family member, close person, it's only the tip of the iceberg for what they are holding every day. And in seeing it, like, I'm sure you guys have had these conversations, seeing it as a disease and not like, I talk about, I'm kind of all over the place, but I make this movie for someone like my mom, right? She's a salt of the earth, 65-year-old woman with a perm. And if you had said to my mom, tell me what you think someone is who has an addiction or someone who has a felony, and she's going to give you a perspective that's shaped by the news of her flavor and the media that she's consumed, and it's going to attach poverty and skin color and all the things, right? But then if you show them this movie and say, don't say anything, just let her watch the movie, and she now knows Josh and Cassidy, and I say, okay, Mom, would you be friends with them? Yeah. Would you hire them? Yeah. Should they vote? Yeah. Would you let them babysit your kids? Yeah. And then I say, so they have felonies. Now she's got to weigh, right, what she thought and what's the truth. And, they have this and they have this addiction, and trying to complicate it to move people who maybe think the world is so black and white and who don't have the full experience on addiction, and to move them into the gray of, yeah, it's not always that clean. And maybe you could be in a relationship and really love and value people who have this a part of their lives. And she does. She watches the film, has met them, and has a different perspective than she would have otherwise, having not seen the movie Clean Slate. So that's why we do this, that's why we do it.
Right.
Well, and that's one of the things we try to get across over and over and over. And Flindt does an amazing job with a parent group that you've been doing 14 years. 14 years every Wednesday night, families come in with their kids and understanding that it's not a moral failure.
Yep.
This is a disease. Like wouldn't treat someone with pick whatever kind of cancer as if it was some kind of moral failure. This is an illness. It is a brain disease, and it needs to be treated as such.
Well, but I also think too that yes, is this a disease? Yeah. I also believe that in some cases it's a disease that we brought on ourselves.
That's true.
Because there are a lot of us that, I want to say fell into this because of medical reasons or because of some sort of trauma that went on in our life. But there's also those out there that made that clear, conscious choice to go out and use because they just wanted to get high. All right. And there was a lot of times when that was me as well. I liked getting high. I liked the feeling. I liked everything it did for me, to me, about me, everything. But when you're trying to explain to somebody that it's a disease, man, you can get some pushback real easy.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just my mind, but there's this make a better decision. Yeah. Right. Like as a retort, well, they could just. And with Josh and Cassidy, I think there's little subtle ways where you realize what their story is. And it is exactly what you're saying. It's medications and an accident and things that you were hooked because it was always in your genetic makeup before you had a choice. What are you doing when you're giving an 8th grader these pills and telling them to take them every day before we knew what that would do, opiates, what they would do to your body, and what switch it flicked that now is definitely you need help to unswitch for sure. So it is a big, messy, complicated thing. And I had a film teacher when I was doing college that said the best way to tell a huge story is through a small window. So there are all of these things being written, podcasts, conversations, movies, Dope Sick, right? Everybody will quote all these other things they've seen. And I would say all of it is needed to see this huge, complex prism of an issue. And depending on which way you shine light, it's going to reveal a new thing. And the best way that I could participate in telling this big story wasn't to go out and say, well, I need scientists in white coats to explain with charts what addiction. That's not what this story is. It's just these two people telling their story, and in doing so vulnerably, it's capital T truth, right? It's not your exact story, but so many of the things that they say you will have said or have heard multiple times, because that's the capital T truth of addiction in today,
New Perceptions North, the premier drug and alcohol treatment and recovery center in Central California. A full continuum of medically supervised, top-quality care with programs for detox, inpatient residential treatment with dual diagnosis, intensive outpatient treatment, sober living, support groups, and more. With 50-plus years of combined experience and sobriety, Flindt Andersen and Thelma Gatlin Wilson provide adult men and women with the highest caliber of professional health care, treating each client with compassion and respect, and a safe, comfortable environment to begin the process of recovery. To proudly create and sustain a life without addiction, call 559-978-1507 or visit newperceptionsnorth.com.
Yeah. What were some of through your personal lens, that you were really surprised about the recovery process and residential treatment in particular?
Oh, man. It's funny to say they're so vulnerable. Also, the way that all of them could so callously talk about it. Like there's definitely this like treating addiction like it was a thing outside of them that was inside of them, but it wasn't them. Does that make sense? It's not their core. So they would talk about it with this distance sometime of like the things that they did or that their body did in control of it by being controlled by it in a past life or even yesterday wasn't them, wasn't their core. And I don't think I had ever understood that until probably when times where I was interacting with some of them, and it was the same face, it was the same clothes, it was the same eyes interacting with me, but it was not them. It was them controlled by or acting out of the motivation of the next. Later, when in a sober spot, they would say, "Oh, he said I would have sold my grandma for another hit. I wasn't thinking about anything or you or any needs of anyone. I just needed the next hit." Right. The next high. So I did that. For me was incredibly enlightening, and I don't think you can understand that by telling someone it until I have been down that road, made those mistakes, learned my own lessons, and figuring out what love actually. I don't like tough love. What does love look like in a moment when it causes you to need to not give them everything that they're asking for. And that was, I never thought making a film project and 5 years later that I would have that lesson to have learned, but that's for me, the power of telling stories is it's not my story and what I need to tell. It's me holding up a mirror to the lives of these subjects, collaborators, and helping them share a version of themselves that's the most true, most honest. Not easy, but the most true. And that then also shapes me as a filmmaker.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and you do a lot of youth mentorship, and your spirituality is important to you. And I bet that's, how incredibly, Flindt, you've worked with young people. I've worked with young people. How incredibly hard that is, because you just still kind of see them, at least us, we're in our 40 and up.
I'm definitely up.
So it's,
I'm in the fourth quarter of up,
it's so hard. It's really hard when you have that, you're in touch with your higher power, whatever it is, and you're wanting to help people and have the best faith. But when it's the hijacked addict's brain, it's, like you said, you're playing with something else.
Yeah, I've got 2 young kids. One of them turned 4 yesterday, and I'm trying with these life lessons to already put them on what it means for me to be a father. And of all the ways and names that God has been attributed, the role of father, mother is definitely one of them. And for me, it's the stories of grace. And what does it mean for me to see a little 18-month-old or 4-year-old that I have now, and to see them not just as how I see them or want them to be or potential futures, but knowing the bads that come with the goods and the journeys of these guys I worked with. Also, we're someone's kids, have been held, have been their diapers changed and fed and grown up. And for me to already have grace, not only for them, but the learned grace that I have in my heart, or that a deity, God, would have for me, that I can offer that to those closest to me, a spouse and my kids, in a way that they'll hurt us too, right? I've been a shit to my parents over seasons, and I'm a pretty good kid. So what does it mean for all of us to have family and kids to be able to also offer that unending capital G grace to someone that my child. So that for me is the way it challenges my daily, and not waiting for a big thing to come, because they come, but being ready emotionally, spiritually, sound of mind and presence to be able to be the most loving presence I could be for anyone, including my closest people when they need it. So, yeah.
Great answer.
Yeah,
it's a great answer.
It's hard enough when you're sober to be there, let alone
I know.
Struggling with you, right?
None of it's easy.
None of it's easy. No.
Well, and I think that's, Flindt, you've said it. We've never had someone show us the light, so it's hard to believe that there's that light at the end of the tunnel, let alone to, know what emotional maturity looks like, spiritual progress looks like, any of these things. It's such a challenge. And I know with you, with residential stuff, it's hard to get the mind clear enough to even be receptive of those.
Yeah, that's one of my big issues right now is, like I said earlier, I own a treatment facility, and, we are just not getting to these individuals like we need to, because we are not allowed the time to do it. you can break down treatment into two categories, at least in my opinion. And it's those with insurance and the ones that are have the ability to pay, and it's the ones that don't or have some sort of government insurance that most private treatment centers don't take because those policies don't pay us enough to keep our doors open. And when you break it down into those two categories, and that's one of my fights right now is somehow getting lawmakers to understand that if you want to put a dent in this problem that we've got, and it's an enormous problem, like we all know, that you guys are going to have to change some laws here. You're going to have to work with insurance companies. We are going to have to figure out a way to get these people the time that's needed. And to me, that initial time has got to be 90 days right out of the gate. We've got to be able to have some. Look, opiates in particular, they cut our maturity level in half. They hijack our dopamine receptors. They hijack our serotonin levels. We're starting out at half of our age when we get clean in that 30-day period. Now we have to go back and start all over again. And addiction is as much a behavioral issue as it is a physical one or a psychological one. It's what we do. It's how we use the drug. Where do we use it? What do we use it with? Do we snort it? Do we smoke it? Do we inject it? Do we roll up $100 bill? Do we break open a pen? Do we use a McDonald's straw? Do we use mom's favorite spoon to cook up our heroin? All that is behavioral, and you can't change that in less than 30 days. Yeah. If you've been doing it for 5, 10, 15, 20 years or whatever it is. Yeah. So we are at kind of a loss to begin with. We're not given the opportunity. We're not given the chance, and again, now that I'm on my soapbox a little bit here, it's like now there's people out there talking about long-term harm reduction, and let's keep them on methadone, and let's keep them on Suboxone, and let's do all that. And my first response is no, let's give them a shot first at abstinence. Let's see if that's even going to work first. Let's just don't throw them into another drug scenario here, because those two drugs, and in particular methadone, I was on it. It took me 2 years to get off of it by myself. Those doctors would have never taken me off of that. And that is the world's worst drug of all time, invented by mankind. It is a nightmare to come off of. And treatment centers, that's another piece of the pie here. Treatment centers will not take methadone clients. It's too damn hard to detox them. It's almost impossible to detox them, and it's going to take a year or so to get them properly detoxed. So that's just kind of a rough idea of treatment and where it is right now.
Yeah, no, to speak to these guys as a part of that system, they know in the system how messed up the system is. And I feel like there's always, I love the advocacy. I love what I've learned. This is about the guys making art, right? You could write that off and say, oh, there's 15 other things that are needed. And I would say it's not an order, it's in all of them. It's kind of like the guys that I met in recovery. It's kind of like the spokes on a wagon wheel. It wasn't one thing on the spoke that would keep them sober. It's all the things, right? It's community. Right. It's you need a mentor. You need to mentee someone. You need something to do with your hands during the day, work. But also one of those things, you need a therapist and medication, and you need all these things. But then you also would need art. And many of these people, they would be poets, musicians, painters, songwriters. They would need some way to express the emotions and the spiritual side of all those. I got goosebumps. All those things that were locked in there too. So you're doing all those things. You need the days you're doing the work. But if you are bottled up still, you're going to explode in a different way. And your behavior shows you that when you're out of control, when you don't like how you feel, what do? And that's exactly what you're saying. You've got patterns. And so in order to reset these patterns, not only do we need the other spokes in the wheel giving us a way to deal with them, but also art for these guys in this film was the way to process the trauma, the memories, the tough stories, the things to also turn those back to good and to have their stories provide hope or an entry point for other people to also move towards health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, most addicts, and in particular opiate addicts are, and maybe I'm not one of them, but they're pretty bright. And, and a lot of times we're taking we're taking these medications to slow our brains down. And because a lot of us are extremely ADHD. But no, there's intelligence factors going on here with people that are addicted to opiates in particular. I mean, I was a voice major and piano minor at Fresno State, my first 3 years. And of course that all went to shit, because of my addiction. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. We need that. And again, it can't be done in a 17 to 23 day period like the insurance companies are giving us now.
No way.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.
Yeah. And I forget, what was the two primary subjects? How long did you follow them for? Was it 60 days or 90? I don't recollect.
Their program is that they were in 18 months to be there. And it was a zero tolerance. So if they had any slip up, including cigarettes or anything, they would start the 18 months again. And so many of them had done multiple times. When we were with them, Cassidy, I think, was on his 4th or 5th try. And Josh was court mandated and he had to complete 18 months. Otherwise he would go serve 10 years in prison. That's a whole nother aspect of it, is the prisons in Georgia where we were are full, and they're begging ways for people to not serve the jail time, but to go get healthy. But they were just trying to put them somewhere else. And so, that's for the movie we filmed I worked with them for about a year, and we filmed the summer of 2016. And then based on the way that recovery goes and the relapses in the program, including someone sold all the camera equipment and the hard drives that the film was on. Luckily, it only exists because I had a backup and had the presence of mind to make them backup. They sold it all for drug money. So that just took extra time. So by the time we were done, we did an extra week and then some reshoots and stuff. But we basically filmed for 10 weeks to get the majority of the film filmed with them.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. Yeah, it seemed to have a good enough span that it encapsulates a lot of that process that really takes place, as simple as from the intake to, when people kind of come clear of mind and actually start accepting and surrender and work the program a bit.
So did this place actually detox the clients first, or was this a detox center?
Different per person. I don't think they would advertise it that way. I don't want to speak for them. That's not my job. But I know when people would show up on the doorstep and are in need of that, people would detox there. But by the time we were there, a lot of the people were coming through the court system. So they had either served some time and had gotten detoxed mandatorily that way, or they had time between a sentencing and 48 hours to get there. And then that is up to the individual. So yeah, it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, makes sense.
Did you see a spectrum once really starting to dig in? Because one of the things that we try to get across here, especially with what's going on with opioids, and our first documentary, I'll send it to you, is focused on moms that lost their children to fentanyl overdoses, and these are women from affluent areas. So oftentimes we try to get across. It's not just the person that's had legal troubles that gets forced there or whatever. It's people that are well off too. This thing is impacting everyone.
Yeah, the people who have experienced legal troubles weren't just because they didn't have money. That was all of them as well, So no, it was everybody. It was everybody. And in years of working with young adults and teenagers, it may be the level of affluence only dictated which drug they were doing, which then has all the ramifications of how the police would treat that drug you were doing and which ones are being regulated more than others. But no, it was across the spectrum. And so all I learned with the people with money is they just were better at hiding it, had more money at their disposal to cover it up. That's basically all it meant. And sometimes that did them worse because they could do them for longer, and they were more addicted, and it was doing worse in their lives because they had been doing it, like you said, Flindt, for not just 1 year or a couple months, but years before their lives would implode. So no, it is everybody for sure.
Yeah, I don't know why this dawned on me, but it's like a number of years ago I got invited to this treatment center in Malibu, all right, for their 5th year celebration or something.
Everybody's addicted.
Right. And I'm going, you know what? I think I'm going to go, and I'm going to take my wife. It'll be, be a nice little getaway for a couple of days. We'll go down to Southern Cal. And so we get down there. And of course, this place, I mean, is a 5-star resort. Yep. You definitely want to stay there if you're on vacation, right? Or even if you're not, because it's fantastic. So so they show us around the place, and I think they invited like 100 people, and then they serve dinner, and of course the food is just unbelievable, right? But what triggered me was you saying when people have the money that they just keep doing it and keep going to rehab after rehab, like Matthew Perry, right? And it was like, so I'm sitting there and I'm talking to this one therapist, and she looks at me, she goes, well, Lindsay Lohan came here. And I looked at her and I said, there's 2 things wrong with what you just said. I said, first of all, how'd that work for her? I said, because she's been here 6 times. I said, and the second thing is, you just blew HIPAA all to hell.
Yeah, I was like, you can't say that.
You can't say that. I look at my wife, I go, we're out of here. Okay. And we got up and we left. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times people that do have, that kind of money, it's rehab is just a revolving door, is just a revolving door. And I'm not saying they're not trying to get the help. All right. But it sometimes it can be tougher when you have that kind of money.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone some sort of social status.
Of course.
Yeah, because then you might get people that are kissing your backside there and, oh my God, it's so-and-so. Sure. And then, hey, you know what? I'll put you in my next movie if you get me a bag. Well, and so many people working at facilities, sometimes there's a lot of us in recovery.
You bet.
And, so it can be a dangerous process.
The voice of addiction can say anything and do anything and will do anything at its disposal or to get the next hit. And if you're at a level or have a life that moves in that direction, it has more tools to use to get you. And it doesn't, you can fall to one, why give it even more? And I just feel like that is a tough mantle to bear on the top of already a tough journey to go that path,
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah, it's it's rough for sure. With that, I mean, Flindt mentioned early on, or at least prior to us recording, legislation and stuff like that. And being you filmed this in Georgia, what do you mentioned the prisons are full, so they're trying to get people somewhere, and that comes a lot with the decriminalization of it. And I often say, okay, if we're criminalizing it, then you need to acknowledge what it is, and a mental health issue. And the vast majority of us have some underlying mental health issue. Mm-hmm. Then, where's the process there? Then the humane action of, okay, you're not putting them in jail, but you can't sit and leave them on the streets either. And I'm sure you saw that throughout the filming of this process and kind of learning about the system in that way.
Yeah, we really did. I think I got a master's degree, and all I learned when I did my master's is that the more I learned that I didn't know anything. Mm-hmm. I was literally now am a studied person with a large master's on this topic, and all that means is I can ask better questions. I know what sources to trust, and then it leads me to better questions about it. And I feel the same way about making a movie. I feel like there are some answers I could give, but none of them are the whole picture. Any stat or fact or thing I think also I could then challenge myself with 5 other questions that challenge that thing. I think for making this movie, I have met and spent a lot of time with people who are the professionals that I trust. And as a filmmaker, I'm very comfortable to hold the mirror up and say, I am not an authority. I'm not a doctor. I learned very real. I'm not a therapist or a social worker. And therefore, I would listen to all the other podcasts that you did to come to today's newest thought or belief. I do believe in the whole wagon wheel of what keeps people moving towards health, and changing legislation is a wild part of that. And I figured out that the lane that I can run in well is telling stories that help change people's minds. Mm-hmm. And if anybody can use this film, show this film, share it with friends, share it with family members that needed encouragement, show it at groups, especially like what you run, Flindt. I'm hoping that groups like yours, show the film to start conversation, show the film to fundraise for you and what you do, show the film, for me, is the best way to change minds by letting people into your hearts. And I've learned that if I, spouting facts and stuff, very rarely do people change minds because I gave them a fact that was fact enough, because we can left side, right side fight any of that stuff. But as soon as you tell a good story, it kind of moves past the head stuff and sometimes into your heart. And maybe that's the best way that I can participate in the change of this overwhelming monstrosity of issues,
No, I love that.
Yeah. Because the governmental stuff and trying to get them to take notice, understand, it's just, it's banging your head against the wall. So many, they just don't.
It's a big fight worth fighting, right? That's the thing you have to get, is like, you could say that's too much and I'll never do it. And it's like trying to turn the Titanic by pushing it. And you say, yeah, but you're not alone. And what's our life and what's your story and how many stories do we have to tell? And there have been other very large issues in this country that over time, give it 10, 20, 50 years, these things change, things pivot, right? And the way we tell stories, and more people have friends and family and kids that experience it, and that's one opinion at a time. And you can watch a very large cruise ship of a thing that looks immovable start to move. And I feel that things are changing, and I'm excited for a day when we could have a conversation here in the future and say how amazing that this and this and this, and they're all started with ground roots work that's happening. So
right. Yeah. And look, it's half the time I get pissed off, but it's like, I'm not going to quit, I'm not going to stop, doing this, not at all. But, when I think the thing that upsets me more than anything especially with our legislature, is we can't even get in a room to have a conversation about it. We're always thrown into, the hearing, the public safety and health committee hearing, where it's so structured that you can't even ask questions, you can't respond to what they're saying. Nothing, unless they're just addressing you, and everything's on a time limit. And it's like, these people it's like, just give us an opportunity. And I don't mean, and what I mean by that is you have to know how to deal with Sacramento. I mean, I'm sorry, you can't walk in there in a wife beater T-shirt, okay, and a bunch of signs held up and yelling at them, because they're going to turn you away. It has to be done with respect. It has to be done in the right forum. But at least give us that opportunity to have that right forum to talk to you in, because they're not even doing that right now.
Yep.
That's what's frustrating.
Yeah. Jared, if people want to see the movie and learn more about you in general, how can they do so?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I'm just excited for people here to see it. The film website is thecleanslatefilm.com, thecleanslatefilm.com, and it has links to everywhere. You can buy it or rent it on everything: Amazon, Google, YouTube, everywhere, Google Play, everywhere that you would watch content that you could rent or buy, you can find this. And then our film company is called People Media, peoplemedia.com. And that has links to all of our short films that have come out over the years and a couple other feature films. You can get to know us there. And then also we've been running an artist residency out of a farm that we work out of in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, near Oakland, California. And that's People Media, and has a residency page on there. And you can read about how artists of all types come and spend time around our baby goats and our chickens and put their feet in the creek. And then make their art in community. It's a pretty great life. So peoplemedia.com and thecleanslatefilm.com.
Oh, that sounds great. Nice. You're actually not too far from it. We might have to venture up that way.
Venture up there. We're like 3 hours away. That sounds pretty good to me.
Anytime you need a place to stay in the Bay, you're welcome to come play on our land.
You got it. You got it. Great. Jared, thank you so much, man. It's a pleasure meeting you, and I'm proud of you for doing this film, man. That's big. All right. It's big, and we're glad to have you on our side. That's for sure. Thanks for everything you do.
I appreciate it. Cheers.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.